Hi everybody, it's Christopher and welcome to Life's Not Over, It Just Looks Different on YouTube. The experience of my sight loss and learning about my sight loss, cortical visual impairment, and all that thing that I've been going through and experiencing, and the why and the how and all that, has been very much like peeling back the layers of an onion that I've been learning bits and pieces over the years. I didn't get the information from any one doctor or get it all at once. And so I thought today I'd talk a little bit about how that sort of came to be. Starting with the diagnosis that I got about 3 months into my sight loss journey, when I saw my optometrist, who, from our conversation and from what he was able to determine from the tests, told me that I had cortical blindness. It was going to be many years later before I realized that that was an old term that nobody was using anymore, but that was the term he gave me at that time. And so at least now I had a diagnosis of sorts. Also, in those early days, in that first year, the neurosurgeon and the neuro-ophthalmologist that I saw said, well, let's wait and see how much of your sight you get back. We don't know how much it's going to be. Let's wait a year and see what happens. That within that first year, I was doing that. I was not really waiting and seeing, as I've talked about in another video where I was doing things to try and improve it. I was not in the wait and see frame of mind. And so I was trying different things, but what I learned later was when my family doctor within that first year filled out the paperwork for me to qualify for the disability tax credit that we have here in Canada. When she filled out that paperwork, she actually wrote that my condition was permanent. But she didn't tell me that. I didn't learn that she had filled out the paperwork to say it was permanent until 5 years into my sight loss, when I thought that my disability tax credit certificate was going to be coming up for renewal and that I'd have to do the paperwork again. Somebody from the government informed me, well, actually, no, your doctor wrote that it was permanent. Oh, I didn't know she had done that. So this is what I'm talking about, how these things sort of came to light at different times. Fast forward again a little bit more, and it wasn't until 2016 when I started working for CNIB and I met two of my colleagues in particular, Sandy and Deb. Sandy and Deb both have an interest in CVI, cortical visual impairment, and I, in meeting them for the first time, mentioned that I was given this diagnosis of cortical blindness. And Sandy said, well, they call it cortical visual impairment now, and that she's been all over it. She's working with a lot of kids who have the condition. And poof, that was a huge eye-opener. Not only because I learned the new term, that cortical blindness was out and cortical visual impairment was the new way to talk about it, but it was also that I met somebody who knew about it, because that hadn't happened. From 2005 until 2016, I was able to relate to other people, or felt I could relate to other people with sight loss, just in the day-to-day struggles of living with it and experiencing it and everything that I was going through. But I had never met anybody else who had this diagnosis that I had. And when I said it to people, they just sort of had this stunned look on their face, or this puzzled look on their face that, okay, I don't know what that is, and we moved on in the conversation. So meeting Sandy and Deb, and then having them tell me about the books of Dr. Christine Roman-Lancy, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a thing. Somebody knows about this. This is amazing. I read Dr. Roman-Lancy's books, or at least her first one, and it made me feel like, wow, somebody gets me. Somebody understands what I'm going through. Her book talked all about the condition in kids, but the 10 characteristics that she mentioned, which I've talked about in my other videos, all of that started to ring bells and bring those aha moments that it's like, wow, somebody actually does know what I'm going through and what I'm experiencing. So that was a huge step forward, and many, many layers peeled back at that point. But even then, I was still learning more, because it wasn't until 2018 I'd had a bit of an episode where I was in hospital and had some real headache problems. Didn't need surgery or anything like that, but it did cause the neurosurgeon to refer me to a neuro-ophthalmologist, because he said he wanted to know more about what happened to me. And it was at that visit in 2018 with the neuro-ophthalmologist that she came to me and said, "When did they tell you you had a stroke?" Stroke? Nobody's ever used that word. And she said, "Well, what did they tell you?" I said, "Well, they didn't really tell me anything, but what I read in the paperwork was that it was an ischemic infarction of the posterior or something or other, medical word, blah, blah, blah." And she said, yeah, all that means stroke. Wow. That was a huge eye-opener. Nobody had ever used the word stroke before. That was a way simpler word, too. So that was a huge bunch of layers peeled back. It's like, oh my gosh, that's what that was. Okay. And then it was also in 2018, after meeting with the neuro-ophthalmologist and going back to talk more with the neurosurgeon, that he told me that what I had experienced in 2005 was called a cerebral herniation. He said it was actually good that the cerebral herniation happened in hospital. He said because if it had happened at home and they tried to get me to hospital in time, I probably wouldn't have survived. How's that for a sobering thought? But that also started to connect some dots for me, because I know from the recounting from my spouse that what she saw at the time in 2005, that day that she couldn't wake me up. She couldn't wake me up. The doctor couldn't wake me up. She said I was snoring loudly and breathing heavily. And all of those things flashed back for me to a time when I watched another family member who had been basically declared brain dead, but their body didn't know it yet. That's exactly what I saw in that person, was the heavy snoring, the heavy breathing, and the body was just hadn't shut down yet, but they were declared brain dead. So knowing that, hearing that that's what I looked like in 2005, and then hearing from the doctor that this cerebral herniation could have taken my life, I was like, wow, way more light bulbs came on and things. So this is what I'm talking about, how these layers have been peeling back and I've been learning more and finding out more. Something else that I was told pretty early on, probably might have even been as early as 2006, was that my optic nerve was looking pale. Okay. Didn't really know what that meant, other than, okay, I guess there was maybe some blood loss to it or something, or I don't know. But recently, within just the past few months, I had an ophthalmologist who seems to know about cortical visual impairment, which is fantastic. So I'm able to ask him questions when I have them and when they pop to mind. In doing all of his tests that he does with all the other patients, like the visual field test, like the visual acuity test, all of those things, which are a little hard to measure for people with cortical visual impairment, he told me something that I'd never heard before, was that I only have about 20% of my optic nerve left. Wow, okay, a new statistic. I love statistics, by the way. I love the numbers. Every time I'm in there, I get the visual field test. I ask them, okay, well, what does that tell you about how much field of vision I have? The number I've been hearing is about 30%. Okay. When I go in for the visual acuity test, I always ask them, what are my numbers? And they'll tell me that I'm 20 over 200 in the right eye and 20 over 400 in the left eye. And those numbers, they bounce around a little bit. Kind of depends on how much sleep I've had, what time of day they're testing me, all that kind of thing. But I love the numbers. I love to know. So these are the little things that keep coming up and giving me just a little bit more to learn. So knowing now, or hearing from this doctor, that I've only got about 20% of my optic nerve, that to me is also fascinating. And it kind of flashes me back to part of that conversation with the neuro-ophthalmologist in 2018, when she said, after doing the tests and having the brain scan and all that kind of thing, she said, you're punching way above your weight. Your body is taking in every bit of light that it can get to help you see and process things, which I'm taking as a badge of honor. Thank you very much, because I'm trying to do the best I can and trying to go forward and trying to keep moving with this, and I'm not trying not to let it stop me. So these are just the things that I've been finding out over all this time and learning about this latest revelation about 20% of the optic nerve is kind of the newest piece of information. And now it has brought up a new question that I'm going to be asking on whatever my next visit is, either with the ophthalmologist or maybe with the neurosurgeon. I want to see if I can connect those dots about the paleness and the diminishing optic nerve. Is that from some other eye problem, because the ophthalmologist says that he also sees a bit of glaucoma happening? Or did the optic nerve damage come from the cerebral herniation? Like, I know that the cerebral herniation damaged brain cells, and in fact, I was once in an appointment with a neurosurgeon, I think it was about 2010, who showed me my brain scan, and I could see this dark spot on the brain scan of dead cells. And he said, looking at this area of dead cells here, I would swear that you were blind. And I said, well, let me tell you a little story. So I told him what had happened in 2005 and kind of filled in those dots for him. So this is my next burning question that I'm hoping to be able to find out from one of the doctors, is how are those two things connected? Are they connected? Are they not connected? This is just the next thing I'll want to know. But it's all very fascinating to me. Learning all of this about my sight loss, learning the hows, the whys, the mechanical, structural part of it in my brain and all these things. It's fascinating. That's the only word I have for it. But I am going to continue to peel back this onion and learn more and more as much as I can. I don't try to get a lot of information from the internet, because my experience with Dr. Google is, and I'm not bashing Google, Google knows all, but when you read about medical diagnosis, sometimes it gives you the worst case scenarios, and that can be a danger. So I don't put a lot of stock into it. I sort of read a little bit. It's like, oh, okay, that's kind of what that is. All right. And it just triggers more questions that I can ask to find out more. So I'm going to continue to peel back this onion, try to learn more, and just add it to more of the adventure that my cortical visual impairment has become over the last 17 years. And although this might sound odd, because it fascinates me, it's also kind of fun. And as you may have heard me say in other videos, I am on this planet for fun. That's everything I wanted to share in today's video. I want to thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate each and every one of you who watches these videos, who's clicked like down below, subscribed to the channel, who's left comments. Their comments are coming in more and more, and I love it. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making the comment. I'm always happy to read them and to respond, and thank you for engaging. I appreciate it. I hope you all have a wonderful day.